take advantage and say good evening, everyone. It's been a wonderful event.
Thanks very much, Nachum.
Yes, indeed. Hello, everyone. And it has been a fantastic conference.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Sydney. Okay, it's 8:17. I still see people arriving, but we will shortly start. Before we close off with the panels, I would like to say a few words in looking back at the conference and so on. But just before we look back at the whole conference and we close and we look ahead on this Yom HaShoah, I also wanted to honor the memory of the victims of the Holocaust. May their legacy be remembered for a blessing, and may our own work on the tradition of the scribes and interpretative communities of Jewish antiquity be a testimony to the life and breath of the vitality of Judaism. Now, in our working on these scribes and paleography, we've had 3 fantastic days of conferencing, and we've seen great examples from paleography on diverse possibilities for writer identification, digital editing, dating of texts, possibilities and dilemmas from AI and computerized paleography, method of paleography, and so on and so forth. And I just want to say how exciting it is to see all these collaborations. And the most important thing is that it's an iterative process based on curiosity, understanding, and that's a process that goes back and forth with careful considerations based on understanding the steps in the process of each discipline. And we have learned so much from each other, and I very much look forward to what's coming now with the panels, and also, of course, ahead in the future of all the things that we still can do. And I want to give the floor now to Drew and to Maruf. They will introduce the panels, and then we'll take it from there, and we'll end with a general discussion. Drew, Maruf, please.
Thank you, Mladen, and thank you again, everyone, for those of you who are able to speak and attend and ask questions. It really has been an exciting conference, and I just wanted to give my personal thanks to each of you for taking your time and the contribution. Mladen, to you as well, thanks for organizing this whole project and getting everything going. And it's been an honor here. We're really happy to be able to show some results, and hope that this final discussion will be a testament to that and will help move things even a little bit further. We've had some really vibrant discussions, and we've had to cut off a lot of people in the middle of sentences because everyone has lots to say, and it's been exciting to see that. And I really enjoyed it and learned a lot. Now, this last session is going to be a lot less formal. We only have less than 50 people here. So I will ask our technical assistant, Andre, if he's listening right now. We'll go ahead and promote all of the attendees for the final session, but we're not going to do that right now. First, we are going to do 2 separate panel sessions with experts, those who presented, and we also have an invited panelist for the first one on digital paleography. For the second one on scribal culture, I'll introduce that in a minute. And the format will essentially be those of you who are presenting, if you would like, you may give brief 3 to 5 minutes or so reflections on what you think about the conference, the state of affairs of the field in light of the conference, anything you've learned or major takeaways, whatever you'd like to share. And then once everyone's had a chance to do that, we'll do some brief discussion between the panelists, and we can open it up for questions from the chairs or from the audience. The third session will be open discussion, and then we'll put everybody in panelists, and we can ask whatever questions we want and interact in a more meeting style. So I will turn it over to Maruf now to introduce our digital paleography panelists.
Thank you very much, Drew. Thank you, Mladen, and As Mladen and Drew already said, but I'll just quickly say I'm also really honored and thank you everyone for attending this conference last 2 days and also today. I was learning a lot, and for me as a technical person, when I'm listening to all these big names talking and discussing, it also a bit of like, in a way, juice to go on and understand how things are going on and how we can tackle things from a technical point of view. So I'll not talk further. Now I will start with our first panel discussion on digital paleography. So in this panel, we already have from our previous speakers, Lambert Schomaker, Nachum Dershowitz, and also Hussein Mohammed. So you already know them. Just to briefly say that Lambert Schomaker is from University of Groningen, then Nachum Dershowitz is from Tel Aviv, Hussein Mohammed is from Hamburg, and we also have, we are really glad to have him as well, Brent from University of Kentucky. Just to briefly say that Brent did his PhD from University of Wisconsin-Madison from 1991. Currently, he is the director at the Center for Visualization and Virtual Environment at University of Kentucky. So welcome Brent as well to this conference. And in the beginning, I'll just ask each of you just to talk and reflect on the conference, what you think and how things are tackling, what are the challenges you see. And then I also will try to accommodate as many people as possible so that we have a lively and nice conversation. So in the beginning, maybe I'll just ask Brent Sills to talk a few minutes on what do you think about this whole conference and what are the challenges, like just to open up a bit, yeah.
Why did I know you were going to do that? I am the least engaged in the conference because I've just been having trouble keeping up. So if you insist on me taking the first round, I'm happy to do so, but it might actually be better for the other participants.
Yeah, it's like all of them already got a bit of chance to talk, but yeah, I can imagine. So maybe I will ask Lambert to just start the floor and then we'll catch up. Yeah.
Thank you, Maruf. Yes, it was indeed extremely interesting to look at all this expertise and all these human brains concerning shapes, history, background, context. Very broad, very impressive, also very diverse. But what I would like to say is that if we look forward in the field of artificial intelligence, then already we are seeing at the moment developments that are even getting closer to, let's say, intuition. When AlphaGo, the Google program that won with Go won, the most surprising thing was that people said, well, chess is logic, but Go is intuition, right? And guess what? Even at this level of pattern matching and supposed intuition, the computer was winning. So a lot of the knowledge that we are talking about can be given to computers. At the moment, we do this in a very strict manner, like giving a writer's identity, attaching it to an image, or maybe transcribing a piece of text, and very particular on each region of interest, we attach the label of the character and so on. However, what we can already do today, and this is in a toy-like fashion, but it is extremely interesting, is VQA, visual question answering. And you can look it up on internet. And the idea is that you have a photograph, and the human user starts a dialogue with the computer concerning the content of the photograph. Is the dog sitting in front of the man with the blue sweater, for instance? Yeah. Are there 3 trees in this photograph? And given a training set where each photograph is accompanied by a rich type of narrative, the types that we have heard in this conference, and if you have enough material, in a not too far future, you could be, as a digital paleographer, go into a discussion about a piece of script. And this gives all kinds of interesting possibilities. So suppose that we had in paleography, we had two teams that have really, let's say, conflicting systematics in describing the text. So we are completely, it's open and free. It's not very strict. You just have a scan of a text and you just talk about it and you type in what you see. But one group has one systematics approach and the other has the other. The funny thing is that you could compare the two approaches in terms of the ability of the computer to make reliable predictions from the two types of labelings, the two types of training sets. Yeah, and I think that would be one possible thought experiment to further the field and to maybe increase the common knowledge and the common systematics about what you're talking about. So maybe this is a big threat against human individualism, etc. But I cannot stop. It would be almost unethical for me not to tell you where this is going in terms of, let's say, visual perception, visual. I'm not using the word intelligence, but understanding the content of images. And this is really going very fast, and there are huge benchmarks every year. I have a PhD student in this area for the normal photographs. So that would be a thought experiment. Could we do something similar like this? Even more advanced just with speech recognition. Yeah. So if we had speech recognition with all the words that were said in the presence of those fantastic shapes and beautiful shapes, and an algorithm listening over your shoulder and trying to make sense out of this. So yeah, that is my opening bid. Is this a threatening future, or and is this comparison maybe to confront it? I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lambert. Nachum, if you want to say a few words.
I tried to beg out of that. Let me just say that virtual conferences have many advantages and disadvantages. Obvious advantage is that we don't have to travel, especially these days. Disadvantage is that we don't meet face to face. We don't sit down for a cup of coffee. We don't. It's much harder to build relationships. And the best thing that comes out of conferences are new connections, new relationships, new bridges. Here we have not just between different teams and different corners of the world, but different disciplines. So I just want to encourage this bridge building and learning how to talk to each other, learning to speak the same language, not just technical things about what's an ascender, but also about how we can help each other do what we do best. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Nachum. I will now move quickly to Hussein.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to say that actually it's a really big honor to be in a panel with Lambert and Nachum. Actually, they were one of the few scientists that I learned from when I started, actually. One of the few papers that I read was from students from Lambert and a few works of Nachum. So I really appreciate that. I wanted to say a very short message, which is, I did my master's and I started my research in robotics. And I thought that it is the only exciting field because I was naive. Then I came to CSMC and I started to realize that manuscripts can be really challenging. The working with images only alone was challenging enough. Then I discovered that they are artifacts and they hold a lot more than maybe even visual aspects to them. Then the last few months, I started my project, actually, if you noticed already, less than 2 years ago. So it's really unbelievable learning period for me. One of the few things that I would say the most important that I learned is that communicating with scholars opens much more opportunities than talking only to my colleagues from computer science. Because actually, in many cases, scholars could communicate to you certain task or problem that you could translate into computer science task, but actually what they are looking for is much deeper. And alternative solutions could be much more viable and feasible to them. Therefore, I would just, well, attribute to the comment from Nachum. The communication was really the key to me to learn more and to be, at least to make my work more helpful and useful for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hussein. It was really nice to hear. Brent, do you want to go in now?
Sure, back to me. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is also an honor for me to be on this panel, and I thank everyone for joining and giving me a chance to be involved. Almost everything I do at the technical level would support the ability to do paleography in this new digital era, and but I'm not a paleographer, so I have an interest in building a new technical framework that can reveal things. But I'm also really concerned that that technical framework be open and collaborative. So one of the things I want to put forward today is the idea of a sort of durable apparatus that goes together with the new technology that we're inventing, so that rather than scholars say, I had this magical thing, I used it and I got this, scholars could actually collaborate, peer review, and say, I have this technical approach. It uses, say, the lens of AI and data, and it produced this, and I'd like you to examine with me the whole pathway of that. And we can create technology to capture that and to do that, but we have to be intentional about it because it's actually not easy. This fourth paradigm that we're in, which is data-based, it's based in large reference libraries that give us a new lens to interpret something. Let me give you an example. We can build a reference library that lets me take an X-ray image and render it as if it looks like a photograph. If you're a paleographer, that might be really interesting to you to be able to see something that I can only capture with X-ray, but to make it look for you like a photograph so that you can see more, so that you can read more, so that you can do better interpretation. However, the question is, in doing that, what have I created that's artificial? What kind of artifacts are there? So we need to be critical of that, and I need to provide an apparatus that opens that up so that we can collaborate. So that's my opening statement.
Yeah, that was really wonderful to listen. Yeah, it has a lot of things to think always. So yeah, if anybody has question or wants to join in, I think Nachum wants to say something. Yes, please.
I want to follow up on something that Hussein and Brent sort of raised, and this is the issue of both open technology and open academic writing that don't want to just encourage. The European Union encourages things to be open and to be shared, but it's important. And in the Qumran project, Reinhard Kratz and Jonathan have negotiated with Brill, for example, so that even if they publish with them, some of the things can remain, the database can remain open and updated. And I think we need to, in everything we do, think about that our job as academics is to bring knowledge to the world and not profits to various enterprises. So that to make the collaboration possible, we need to make the products of our industrious efforts available. I just thought this is a good forum to bring this up. And there are open journals, and there are open many ways to publish openly, many ways, and not just to pay 5,000 euro or something so that your paper is open access, but to also make the data open and the software open and to share as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. We have still a few minutes. So if anybody wants to ask questions, they can. I also want to say something quickly. So because all of you are established name in this field, and yeah, we kind of like as student, we always look towards, yeah, when we look up, we see most of you. So my quick thing is like over the 2 days, we always hear this thing about, with computers mostly, the trust, reliability issue, and then using AI. And my simple thing is not a question rather than confusion in a way, if I want to put it, that is it like the AI is making decision or the computer is making decision in this field, or is just another tool like a calculator? Like if you have some thoughts on this.
I think that AI is a misnomer, actually. It should be IA, intelligent assistant. Okay? Because what you're really doing as a paleographer is using the most sophisticated tools you can to do what only a human can do, which is understand the human condition. And I think expecting AI to make those decisions, that's never going to happen. That's my opinion.
Lambert,
I've done a
Nachum.
digital paleography meeting a number of years ago, and there were some young computer scientists that presented their work and saying the computer has shown that this epigraphic thing is whatever. The computer proved this, and the paleographers just didn't understand the words. I mean, the word proof is not part of the lexicon. You mean to say that you found some evidence to corroborate some theory? Say so. And this is part of the disconnect between disciplines and thought processes.
Yeah, maybe I'm expected to say something at this point. Yeah, of course, one of the frustrations of AI researchers of today is that the journalists have equated AI with just one technique of our very big discipline, and that is the neural networks. And so historically, AI was very strongly founded in logic-based ideas. The idea was that intelligence and logic are strongly intertwined. So from the 60s and 70s, the basic paradigm was logic. Well, that didn't work out that well because there is, in the real world, there is chaos and there is noise, and logic is fantastic. Who would debate with logic? But the big problem was, and this is interesting, I think, in paleography, is that it was completely underestimated how much work it is to get one bit. And that is maybe a strange statement in times where people talk about terabytes, but extracting one bit, one piece of certainty from reality is extremely difficult, extremely difficult. In even around 2000, when there was robot football, the teams would calibrate the color of the ball, which in our eyes is completely orange, just before the match, in the hope that the robots would see the orange ball. And then when the weather changed during the match, everything failed, right? So and how was it solved eventually? And now this is, of course, a trivial problem, is that you have massive training sets that do this. But what I want to say is that artificial intelligence as a discipline has much more to offer than, let's say, single tools that take an image and come out with some prediction. And in fact, in the roots of AI, let's say the proving stuff with logic, and so it was very important. And also in the 90s, the dialogue aspect, that agents are communicating with each other in the hope of getting it at the better information situation, is also very essential. And all of that is lacking in modern deep learning, and many of the young students even don't know all that stuff because indeed it's a bit of a hype driven world. So I would not promise anything in the deeper sense. I mean, the brain has 100 billion cells. A lot is not yet known. The amount of data that is in there is really fantastic, and the way it operates also is still much more advanced than what we do in computers these days. So I would be limited in my claims, maybe more limited even than other people in the past. But the reverse is also true. If you guys give a lot of text and interpretation to natural images, this can be used. And this can be used, put to good use. You will find connections that were very hard to find out in the manual way. And that this will be all very surprising in many ways. And because, yeah, that you cannot beat, say, the laws of statistics and information. This is what we have learned. Many things that we thought that I thought were difficult or impossible are possible today. Automatic coloring of black and white movies. My teacher said it is impossible because if you go from color to grayscale, you have lost 2 channels. It's an ill-posed problem, like I discussed. It's impossible to recover. What do we know today? Because of the statistics in the natural environment, the texture of grass, the texture of brick, you can make an educated guess of what the colors might have been. Yeah, and so there is no magic. Yeah, and I don't want to equate human intelligence and machine intelligence, but there is a lot in store for us.
There's no question that that we're in a really powerful era of this 4th paradigm of data science. But just to follow up my earlier comment, I'm putting a link in the chat. Reporter wrote back in the day when we digitized a manuscript using a robot arm. The headline was "Robot Scans 3D Manuscript." And I can tell you that I've never met a robot that could do that. So didn't happen.
Yeah, we have to educate the journalists as well, right?
We have to educate the journalists as well in our field, Lambert.
Yeah, but for journalists, maybe it's not interesting enough if a human does that, right? Yeah, it sounds good if a robot does that. Anyway, I think Drew has a quick question.
Yeah, now that I've got each of you here, I want to ask on behalf of the humanities people, this issue of trust and reliability and explainability and how there's a trade-off between these different kinds of things sometimes. I just wonder, with your experience now and the state of the field, how would you personally confront this problem, and how would you balance those priorities going on in the future?
First, I could ask a question back. Are you willing to give up your authoritative position of trust? In the humanities, one thing I've noticed is that those who are doing the assessment, making conclusions, like the idea of being the trusted authority. So in what should we trust?
That's not a fair question. Am I willing to give up trust? I let doctors do my medical stuff generally, and I don't try to self-treat myself. I think there's room, even for specialists, to be able to admit that there are things beyond their control and even understanding, but there needs to be enough trust and competence to understand and evaluate how trustworthy and reliable something is. At some point, you can't hand over everything. I can turn it over my medical care to my doctor, and my doctor can turn over peer-reviewed medical things to the academics. But the academics, who are they going to turn it over to? There's no higher rung. So at some point, human experts need to say, well, I have to understand this, at least in conversation with digital people. Otherwise, there's no accountability.
Well, what I would say is I like to be able to put forward a piece of work that says, here's a process, and we understand every piece, and you can inspect every piece. So you're not really trusting in me, other than to say, I put this together for you, and I trust the process, and I think I understand it. And I'd like you to understand it too. So what I was kind of getting at is often in the judgments that are made when you do paleography or when you do textual criticism, there isn't really a way to open up that process and take yourself out of the trust line. So what we really do is just trust the scholarship of you, that you're drawing the conclusion. And maybe what would help me sometimes is for you to assess how trustworthy do you think you are? Are you 60% sure that there really is a different author happening here, or whatever the conclusion is? It's hard to say. Typically, we don't have so much of that trouble in the scientific side because we can look at the process.
Yeah, I mean, part of it we're dealing with kind of parallel trajectories. We're studying the same topic, but we're looking at things very differently and looking at different types of evidence and observing different things. So when they don't necessarily point in the same direction in an obvious way, then it becomes a question of really narrowing down, okay, who's right, or how do we reconcile these two different perspectives? Because you can't just necessarily say, well, one is going to be right and the other is nonsense. If there's real evidence that people are looking at, you have to be able to reconcile them somehow.
And what is interesting about AI is that it forms kind of a middle ground where you estimate some statistic, that's probably not right, but close. And then in the end, the composite of all of that can actually get you somewhere, which is really interesting, right? I see Lambert shaking his head.
Yes, I fully agree. Yes, there's a line of methodology which is called Bayesian thinking, and you can even start with a completely subjective probability estimate that something is true or false, and you take that as a starting point, and then you start to collect your evidence, and hopefully you have an instrument that also gives you the probabilities of the additional statements or the additional evidence that comes out. Yeah, and then gradually you can get for your probability that maybe is slightly above the coin. So let's say 55% correct. By collecting more evidence, there's just a mathematical procedure. You can improve your certainty as you go along, and at some point you stop, because then you have the trust that the bit is really 1 or 0, and that the fact is true. And but basically humans have a lot of problem with reasoning with probability. We see this also now with the AstraZeneca case and the blood clotting. The probability of getting this problem is very, very low. I think it is between getting hit by the lightning or being bitten to death by a dog. This is what a Dutch doctor said on television. But this is, for most people, reasoning about trust in terms of probability is fairly difficult.
Yeah, yeah, I see both Mladen and Daniel wants to talk something. We're really running out of time, but maybe quickly, yeah, Mladen, yeah.
Yeah, just to say, this is really fantastic, and I like very much, Brent, what you put forward, a very provocative question. It was not about trust, I think, Drew, but it was about authority. Are you willing to give up your position of authority? And what I find interesting also, I think it's the road ahead is not to, how do you say, reify each discipline, say here you have AI and here you have the humanities, but be more nuanced about what's happening in each of these disciplines. Because for the part on the humanities, for example, yeah, we can sometimes talk for a long time and disagree on what we see. So we have there the issue of, okay, the things that you observe, what you see, how are you going to communicate and share that with someone else and make them see them at that as well? And it was interesting yesterday in the paper by Judith, how she explained, with the well, you can look at 100 aleph, but it's not going to help you paleographically. You need to know what is pertinent. And that is exactly the question. And I find this fascinating because the basis of the question is, how do we know? How do we know what is the case? And can you share it? And what I like, Brent, what you said is the procedure is transparent, and it starts not just only with trust, but first, of course, with understanding. And if there are checks and balances, and then trust can come. But first, I think it starts with curiosity and understanding how each discipline works. And it's not putting the one over against the other. I really think that we should and can collaborate, but that's an iterative process. And I find it a very exciting one to understand on each side. Why? In the end, I think we look at the same thing. We now look at images if we don't have access to the original manuscript in a museum or in an institute. And we look at these images, and yeah, you can look at it from different angles and disciplines, as long as you are able to share everything. And that is sometimes even more difficult on the humanities side than I think on the AI side at the moment. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mladen. I know we are still over the time, but I don't want to really close this conversation yet. So I'll take a few minutes from Drew and then I will ask Daniel to give his comment. Daniel?
Well, it's more a question. It's
okay.
The main question that I wrote to you with some people in the CC in the email, which is for me the main question to this conference, and we are talking about trust and understanding, which is how do you get from your big data ranges of 200, 300 years down to 50? It's not clear to me, and if you can explain this in the final session, this would be the greatest gift you could give, at least to me. And I think for the conference, it would be really, really, really fruitful, because that's what we want all to get home with. Why is this a method better than what we were used to?
Maybe as a start, Daniel, you say from a range of 200-300 years, but as we explained, the range is of course set by the C14 dates, and sometimes they're much smaller. So that is, I think, the basis of how we get to smaller ranges. So it's not like as if there's a 200-300 year range. The C14 ranges are smaller than that, of course. So I'm not sure I understand your question completely. What do you mean, which range?
Just take one of the graphs. Let's just take the one which really hit me was 11Q18, and get into the nitty-gritty formula, how you get down there from 250 years or whatever it was to 50.
Yeah, maybe I can quickly explain if everybody, yeah, so I'll just take a couple of minutes. So one thing is that with, for example,
do you want me to show you the graph?
Yeah, sure. So the thing is that with Nash and with 1Q Isaiah, it is kind of straightforward. I think everybody kind of understood that we have like 50 to 60 years of range that has big high peaks, and the other parts we don't have that much of high peaks.
So we need the graphs and all. We haven't.
Yeah,
seen
then I will quickly show it maybe.
It.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll do the presentation. Do you all see this? So for this, it makes total sense, right? I think so. The basic idea of it, that for each of the 10-year bin, I'm just explaining for everyone again, that for each of the 10-year bin, starting from minus 310 to plus 200, you get a prediction out. Then you see the prediction, and you see that almost every year or half of the bins has some kind of peaks going up and down. The issue is which one to take. So do you see my mouse cursor?
Yes.
Okay, so basically, from a statistics point of view, you want to choose either this one or this one, right? And then from these two, you see that this one, even if it is still giving you some mean, but the mean and the error, the combination of it, if you think each of them as their own Gaussian, then you see that the reliability is really low here. And the reliability is really high here. So it's an easy decision in a way. Does it make sense? Then from when I give this image to Mladen or anyone in the humanities field, for me, yeah, it doesn't really matter which one you want to choose. Both of them has probability. This one has higher, this one has higher, and this one has lower. So if you ask me to choose, I'll choose this one. Now the problem begins when you go to image like, I'll show, can you give me one number?
You want 11Q18, if you can find that one easily.
11Q18, yeah, just a second.
Gemma has it on her computer too, if you want to just have her.
Yeah, Gemma can open it, yeah, it's okay. yeah, I already have it. Is this one or?
Gemma's sharing the screen right now.
Oh, no,
Okay.
oh, sorry.
Oh, never mind.
You
Okay.
got it. You got it.
Maybe something like this is making everyone more confused, right? Or we have more ugly ones. And for this one, it is difficult. We cannot do a direct Z transform on this field. It means like we cannot do like a standard deviation by mean to find out which of the means or which of the probability is more likely. And as I think Mladen told, that this is still kind of fresh. So we are still working on to have a prediction out of it. So I was looking through the video of our first day's presentation, and yeah, I realized that also Drew was showing strict dates, but just remember that those dates are not from a computer or not from mathematics or not from statistics. What I get is just exactly this picture. And then you have to, how to say, make a decision which one you want to choose or you want to keep all. So from a statistics point of view, or from my point of view, yeah, you see that all these three harms has some probability, even with the higher errors. Now, if you want to choose this one, yeah, you can say that if we ignore the error bar, it is still have higher mean than this one. But this is where we are still working on to make some prediction out of this prediction to choose which bar I want to choose. So this is something I cannot just say directly that this one that minus 350 is true and the one that is in 0 is not true. So the probability still lies as it is. There is no denying of that. Now, if you want to make a decision, then you have to be careful on what basis you're making the decision. If you're making the decision on the basis of mathematics, yeah, then you cannot rule out one and just keep another. You have to keep all of them as it is and then just present the probability. Now, if you have some other evidence, like for example, Drew or Gemma has some other evidence that, okay, this is never possible in minus 350, yeah, you are most welcome. I cannot really ask you to stop that. So that was my take on it. So for me, this is what I give. I don't do anything on top of this. The only thing I'm planning to do is if I can make these plots a bit more nicer or better so that you don't have to deal with all this confusion. Because it took me some time to also to let people understand what this error bar actually means and how it is happening with all this training data of C14 all around. And one thing we have to say that the training data is C14 and they are not one date, they are always this distribution of probability. And if your training data is a distribution, the best you can get out of it is also a distribution, not a single date or not a 10-year bin. And if somebody promises that they're going to give a 10-year bin, I don't know how, but yeah, they're welcome.
Thank you very much,
if I understand
Maruf.
you correctly, you would say in the instance of 11Q8, you would like in a C14 graph, you have like 60%, then it's in the first half of the second century, and 35% or whatever that it's in the later range, and 5% wherever something
Yeah,
like
more similar. Yeah, exactly. Like I still have to calculate depending on the error, how much area I have. But if I talk about the whole thing as a unity, yeah, definitely this area is divided into different parts. And this is how it is. I will never change this thing to anything else. This is the raw data. And then the people start making decision on top of that. But wherever there is a zero prediction, in those places, I confidently say that if the C14 is true, you can never have something on the zero.
Perfect, thank you. That was extremely helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to take all of your time.
Yeah, it doesn't, just to say, Daniel, I mean, we unfortunately don't have time for a whole new lecture, but we will put this on before the summer because we are putting out all this together. And then it will be, before it will be published, we'll put it again on archive like we did with the Isaiah paper. So you can see everything, the underlying data and all the things that, that went into this. But I'm glad your question was answered.
Yeah, thank you. And I also have Ira Rabin and Bronson waiting. So Ira, if you want to quickly ask the question, you can turn on your mic.
No, it's not important anymore.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll go to Bronson quickly. Bronson, you can turn on your microphone.
Hello. Yes, I guess you can probably hear me now. My question was just basically about the ethics of research, and that it's very difficult when you present scientific, as you know, when you present scientific research to somebody with a humanities background. We're not trained for that. And so I just wanted to at least broach the topic of where the responsibility lies when publishing an article like this, on making sure that the community that it's really targeted at can actually really understand it. And this also goes to the question of, as we're teaching Dead Sea Scrolls, as teaching our students, should we force them to take statistics classes? And so I'm just interested in what your input is on that issue.
If I may, yeah, I will definitely ask Lambert, but maybe also I will ask Gemma to chip in quickly, because I see that she was nodding and I think she has a few lines to say. Is it really necessary or not, from Gemma's perspective?
Oh, sorry, I think I'm echoing. Coming into this as a humanities person and having to have learned statistics via Lambert and Maruf, I just wish I had have had a better statistics. So yes, if you have the expertise to teach your students statistics, it's wonderful to learn about, and it is important. Like, we need to be able to make these calculations. It's kind of how it works. If you're interested in kind of combining your humanities work with the digital perspective. Sorry, I didn't mean to nod so much though. I was nodding to my colleague here in the room.
Okay, perfect. Then I will just close up, but before that, Lambert, if you want to say something quickly, and then we'll round off this.
Yeah, but statistics are not so scary. In the Netherlands, the judges even get lessons in statistics to understand something of that. And if you talk about quantitative approaches, even a baker has some sense of what is a decent bread price. So again, the trust issue comes in. So you have to start working with it, get the feeling of what these probabilities mean and what tools there are. And Hussein also showed that you can count the feature that you think you see, and then you can do statistical tests on that. So it is not really rocket science. It is maybe a little bit tedious in the beginning, but I'm happy with Gemma's response.
Thank you very much, Lambert, and thank you, everyone. We are way over the time, so I will pass it to Drew to start the Hebrew Aramaic Paleography and Scribal Culture panel discussion.